I'm Pat McGrew, Managing Director of McGrew Group. I'm here today to talk about how CEOs can get it wrong to get it right. And I'm coming from a platform of experience. I'm a former CEO. I've been the president of a number of companies, and I've worked in the industry for a long time as a consultant and strategist. So I'm trying to gather up everything that I've learned to help you make decisions that will help you grow your company from a slightly different perspective. I want to help you understand that, the passion that your people have and the checkbook that you have to work with don't have to be competing entities. So let's start with a basic myth that every single check that you write, every penny needs to be accounted for and quantified. And that when it's time to make a big ticket investment, that it's going to be critical for you to justify every cent on that check that you write. The reality is that in the market that we live in today, it's probably closer to about 2/3 of the equation. Yes, absolutely justifying an investment is important, but you need to leave yourself some wiggle room because that's where differentiation emerges. That's where the opportunity to take a leap and grow in a new direction, expand your product offerings, streamline your production operations can give you that impetus for growth you might not get any other way. If you're too conservative with your investments, you might find that you're missing pieces to the equation that other companies have jumped onto and is helping them grow. How do I know? Well, one, I've lived the dream with my own companies, but also look at some of the biggest names in the business. You're going to recognize a lot of these, right? You're going to recognize Siemens and Coke and Bosch and El Corte Inglés. All of these companies over time have had to make radical changes in their business models in order to continue to grow. Certainly, the last year has proven to be a really interesting challenge for many of us because all the things we knew, all of a sudden that platform was gone. All of a sudden the regular customer orders, the contractual arrangements may have needed to be rewritten in order to accommodate changes in customer businesses and changes in your ability to produce. It's not a problem. You can survive. Anybody remember New Coke, right? All of the things that every large business, medium tier business, and small business goes through, it's just one more feather in the cap of experience. The trick is to figure out how to look at where you are, look at the markets that you serve, look at the equipment that you have, the capabilities that you have, and to figure out when is that optimum time to make an investment in a big ticket item, and how to use a few additional considerations that you might not normally have used, right? We want to think beyond just a pure quantification. We want to think about growing the business in new ways. Some of you may recognize the graphic that's on the screen, and it's one I tripped over a few years back, and I fell in love with it because it so well describes so many different business models. Your organization may be top-down, a single authority figure at the top managing every single aspect of the business, or you may have empowered directors, you may have empowered production people. You may have teams that are extremely well integrated. You may be operating a company that has a lot of silos. Every possibility I can think of, I have seen in the last 5 or 6 years, and every company finds a way to continue to grow. The challenge going forward is going to be that we're facing some new challenges in the market that we didn't really allow for. Right? Nobody really planned on a pandemic. No one planned on having to go into lockdown. No one planned into serving customers who were facing some of those same challenges. So now the question is, what do you do to continue to grow your business and to prepare for what's next? Well, first thing is to start to codify how you normally think about your big ticket investments. Are you a kind of company that, identifies every opportunity, builds a lot of spreadsheets, tries to identify and forecast the markets that you're serving? Or are you a shoot from the hip kind of person? There are companies that are successful both ways. I'm going to suggest to you sort of middle ground. You don't want to overinvest, you don't want to underinvest, but you also don't want to be a helicopter over your production teams and the possibilities that they may see. You may have some team members who see just amazing possibilities if you could just invest in a different type of workflow, an additional piece of equipment, some new finishing, a different way of thinking. You want to start looking at your business almost with an outsider's look. What are the things that you could do that would materially impact your business to help you grow it? There are all these things that you can see on the screen that are certainly worth considering. But the thing that you will need to do before you do anything else is figure out what your business rules are. What are the rules that you use? Because the next thing we're going to want to do is to figure out what rules we should be breaking, what investments we might make that doesn't have a guarantee of success, but will lead us to deeper understanding of how we can continue to grow. So let's go back to our myths and our facts. It is a myth that you need a major digital transformation project to meet all of your market needs today. It's just a myth. You can do incremental transformational change in your organization. And in fact, depending on the culture of your organization, you may not need a big change project. You may just need to sit down with your teams to say, hey, what do we do to continue to grow? What opportunities do you see? Salespeople, what are you hearing? Customer service people, what are you hearing? Production people, what are you seeing? What kinds of jobs are coming in and how can we get more of them? It's not a tough thing to do. It may be counter to your culture, but it's not a tough thing to do. Thing to remember about big digital transformation projects is that 70% of them fail. And I know that sounds terrible. I know it sounds like why would we want to embark on something that has a 70% chance of failure? Well, because failure is an option worth exploring. Every project, whether it's a digital transformation project, exploring new substrates, exploring new finishing opportunities, exploring new workflows, they don't have to be successful to move the company forward. Failure is an option to succeed. And as strange as that sounds, it is so ingrained in some companies that they live by it. So you may recognize Satya Nadella from Microsoft on the screen. He's written some great books and some great articles and sat for some great interviews about the transformation that he had to undertake at Microsoft when he took over, because frankly, he had some issues, and they may be issues you're facing too. He had too many individual products, and they were managed by organizations that had gotten quite large. Every feature had a product manager. And that wasn't really healthy for the business, and it wasn't healthy for the growth of Microsoft. No two organizations were managing the business the same way. They were all using inconsistent metrics, which made it hard to figure out where any one piece of the business was. The thing that he felt was one of their biggest failures was that they had lost contact with their customers. They had no empathy. And without that empathy, it was hard for them to understand what products they should be trying to develop for the marketplace that they served and for the OEMs that they served, as well as their direct customers. And he found that the focus was so intent on growing the software business and maintaining market share that Microsoft was not a healthy company. They were sort of, in many ways, they were extremely successful. At the same time, he considered them to be failing. So he wanted to take a few steps back and start to rethink how Microsoft approached things, to embrace the failures that he saw and find a way to turn them into success and growth. He had a very long talk with the teams that managed the different products, and he appointed Julie Larson Green as the Chief Experience Officer to try and bring the product lines into some synergistic ecosystem where they could learn from each other. And if you remember the graphic from a few slides ago of the Microsoft environment, these were organizations that didn't talk to each other, didn't interact with each other. Some said they didn't even like each other. But now their mission was to grow together to create a Microsoft that was going to make sense for the future of the company. He wanted to change the performance metric management into something that made more sense and was actually going to help the business grow. So what they wanted to do is focus instead of, how many widgets did we ship, how many pieces of software did we ship, he wanted to refocus on customer satisfaction and product uptake. So why was that important? Because they had created such a morass of metrics that had nothing to do with whether anybody was actually using the products or not. He could not easily tell as the CEO whether he had successful products or failing products in the marketplace. All he had were multitudes of teams who were each convinced that it was their product that was going to save the company. He needed to change that. He needed an easy way to tell if what he was building to sell was actually going to be bought by anyone. And some of you may have some of that same challenge. Think about what your salespeople sell. Think about what you're capable of producing. Are the salespeople selling what you're capable of producing, or are they just selling what they've always done? The Microsoft problem was they were doing things the way they had been doing them for a long time. He made empathy a key element of the value proposition of the internal teams. He believes that empathy is the key indicator of success. I don't know if it's the leading indicator or not. I respect his view, but I do know that companies that are empathetic with their client base typically do better. There's tons of research that bear it out. So start to think about how you're approaching your customers. Every time they call, are you annoyed? Is your CSR team annoyed? Are your sales teams annoyed? Are your production teams annoyed? Are you getting calls from customers asking for changes that in fact it turns out are the result of the fact that your product specifications and how you specify things, it's too tight for the market that you're serving today? Turn things around and think about how your customers hear how you want to work with them, and maybe listen to how they want to work with you. The last thing Nadella said is that his mission was to empower every person in every part of the organization and in every organization on the planet to achieve more. Big words, big company, totally get it. I don't know that for my company I ever thought in terms of empowering every person on the planet to do better. I appreciate and respect the desire to do it. But the thing that I do know I have control of is the customers that I serve. So sitting on top of the company I have now and the company that I had 10 years ago and the one that I had 20 years ago, the thing that I will tell you is that it makes a tremendous difference in the corporate culture when everybody is working towards empowering customers to be their best at the same time you are empowering your teams to be their best. And that means giving them permission to fail. So we're going to get there in just a second. Let's start with where we began the process. Identifying big ticket investments is scary. And no CEO wants to make a big ticket investment that fails. You don't want to buy a press that it turns out does not meet the needs of the customers you're trying to serve. You don't want to invest in workflow that never gets fully installed and is never fully used. You certainly don't want to be adding people, adding staff just because the staff that you haven't taken time to train, or you've had to repurpose people in order to meet nonstop emergencies. And no one wants to be buying professional services from anyone if they can possibly avoid it, best I can tell from all the interviews I've done. But every one of those can be a big ticket item. So as you're sitting down to look at your forward planning for the rest of this year into next year, your 5-year plan, what piece of your business do you think needs investment? Would you be able to sell more high margin work to organizations if you had different finishing, different post coating, different enhancement, maybe even additional augmentation of your current press kit? What could you do if you had a little bit more? Where would investments really pay off? Is your problem capacity? Or is your hardware just fine, but you can't get the work to it? Is your problem a workflow problem? Is that where you need to make the investment? Look across all the things that you struggle with and all the complaints you get from your teams and all the places you see bottlenecks, and start to think about where that big ticket item might be best placed. You certainly want to look at the numbers. You want to look at the forecast for the kind of work that is going to come in. But remember that most of those forecasts are based on what you can do today, not what might be possible if you have better kit, better workflow, cross-trained staff, access to partners with additional types of finishing. So think about those big tickets in terms of what's possible. And if you have team members who are lobbying for specific kinds of investments, it's fair to get them to make the presentation to you to justify it. But also think about it from your perspective. Who can you help if you make that investment? What additional piece of business can you unlock if you make that investment? Remember that not all decisions are created equal. And I know I had a hard time with that. I wanted to believe that everything that I did was immediately relevant to the business and to the success of the business. And it took me a lot of years of hindsight to realize that there were a lot of places in my decision-making process when I was a CEO that I could have literally pushed decisions downstream to my directors and to my managers. Not just that I could have allowed things to actually fail in order to move the ball forward a bit more. So if you look at Jeff Bezos, he makes the point that there are two types of decisions in a business organization, that you have the opportunity to do irreversible decisions and reversible decisions. And he says that whether you realize it or not, the vast majority of the decisions made every single day, including investment decisions, are reversible. About the only things that are irreversible are sort of shutting down the company, selling it, mergers and acquisitions because they have long tail contractual obligations. But pretty much everything else that you do, even buying new kit, it's all reversible. How many printers have you met? How many companies have you talked to that brought a press in and 6-9 months later, sent it back or sold it on because it just didn't fit into their forward plan? It's not unusual. So here's what you want to do. You want to start looking at all of your decisions in terms of what they bring you, what your expectations are for the value that they will bring to the business. Certainly try to quantify what additional business you think you'll bring in as a result of it, but add another column and start thinking about what happens if it doesn't work out. Plan for it, know about it. We don't ever hope for failure, but be aware that failure happens and maybe you'll learn from it. So put that little tickler out there so you can think about it. Fast failure can be a really great way to learn fast and grow your business fast. And nobody likes that failure word. But this is effectively what Agile is. So if you're aware of Agile development methodologies, you know that it's broken into small bite-sized chunks. Those small bite-sized chunks flow up into the next kind of medium-sized chunk. And then those medium-sized chunks flow up into what becomes ultimately a final project. It's a new style. Well, it's not new anymore. It's been around a while. But it's a totally different approach to product development than the waterfall approach where everything just flows downstream. And I like the Agile concept for CEO-based and president-based and director-based decision-making because it allows me to look at things incrementally. When I'm working with clients, it's one of those things I try to help them identify. What are the small things we can do fast that we'll know pretty quickly if it's the right decision or not? And then what happens if we put a bunch of those together? Then what's our next big decision? Think about the type of work that you produce today, no matter what segment you serve. Whether you're industrial, you're commercial, you're transactional, you're doing corrugated, you're doing labels, you're doing folding car, whatever you're doing. Think about things that you could do to add and enhance the value proposition of what you produce. And start to think about the changes that would be needed in your workflow, in your production team, in your kit in order to do it. What's the first thing you can pilot? What could you try? Do you have a client who's friendly and likes to pilot things with you? Try it. Practice it. Do it. And then evaluate the result. And if it worked, do it again. If a few things didn't work, rinse things off, lather up again, and repeat it. And if it sounds like I'm talking gibberish, I was on the phone this morning with a company that does corrugated packaging. And they are one of the early adopters of digital technology. The gentleman I spoke with actually came out of variable data printing in the commercial space, and he's applying everything that he knows into the digital corrugated space. And what I just described, the try it, pilot it, rinse, lather, repeat, that's exactly what he's been doing for the last 6 months, and he's going to keep on doing it. He's got a couple of friendly customers that are willing to try some new things, and he's created a workflow that I started talking about 5 years ago. And rinse, lather, repeat. I'm sure that somewhere in your shop there is that exact same thing that you can do. And remember, there's going to be failure, but eventually you're going to get it right, and you're going to have something that is differentiated, that really tells your story. Now, to be successful in your shop, you may discover that you have folks on board who are not excited, and that is not unusual. So what you want to start doing is identifying your unofficial leaders, your influencers. The gentleman I was talking to this morning, he said he was blessed with a production manager who was as geeky as he was delighted to learn about the capabilities of doing variable data printing to a corrugated box. And so he's been as excited as anyone to pilot things and try things out. Find those people. Find the evangelists on your team who want to try new things. They may be in your sales team, your customer service team. They may be in your production team. Heck, they may be in your shipping team. They may be in your back office. But find them. Brainstorm ideas. Bring customers in for focus groups when you're allowed to do that, or have a group Zoom call. But start thinking about what you could do to grow your business, because I promise you the competition is only going to get worse over the coming years. Even though a lot of companies have shut down, it might seem like, the grass is really going to be green for a while. I promise you the competition is going to be out there, and the people who will succeed are the people who will rinse, lather, and repeat. So find your unofficial leaders, and then Plan for success, embrace your failure, and grow. Keep your ear to the ground. Watch for resistance. Make sure that you're empowering the people who want to help you grow, and make that culture your culture, the culture of change. You can embrace failure to grow. I know, totally counterintuitive. Who would have thought? But you know what? It's these kinds of opportunities at these junctures in our business life that make such a difference. I love helping people do this. I will be absolutely delighted to talk to any of you anytime about the things that you want to do. I want to remind you of the value of the CEO in the organization. The CEO sets the mindset. They set the vision. They set the culture. Be the person who embraces failure to grow the business. I think you'll find a lot of opportunity. Okay, big secret here. You don't want every project to fail. You don't. But don't be afraid of it. And that is how a CEO can get it wrong to get it right. I'm Pat McGrew. I am incredibly accessible. Happy to talk to you online, on the phone, through LinkedIn, any old time. Come, let's chat.